Well, it seems we are all together now. Welcome again. Good morning, good afternoon. I was saying that COVID pandemic showed us that the health of our economy depends on all business, no matter their size. Now, as we enter the new normal, it's clear that only when the smallest returns to business as usual, we can declare success. But getting to this point depends on business resilience. We have a distinguished panel here today of entrepreneurs and policymakers who will share their thoughts and experience on COVID-19 resilience, especially the importance of international trade. Some housekeeping before we start, if you allow me. For the first half of the session, I'm going to start today's conversation with some questions for each of our panelists. After this, I will turn the floor over to you, the audience, to ask questions of your own for the last part of our time together. Questions will be received through both the chat function of this virtual platform and as well as from all you here in the room. For those in the room, please write your questions on the paper provided and pass it to the facilitators, please. They will be around in the room. Separately, interpretation is available in both French and Spanish for all those listening to us. This event is also being recorded and will be made available at the end of the public forum. So, logistics aside, let me welcome Ms. Pamela Koch-Hamilton to provide us with some very insight, if I may say, introductory words. So, Pamela, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Fellow panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be here with you all today, and it's great to be back at the WTO Public Forum. And it's actually public. I see people, which is great. This is a space that brings voices outside of the WTO inside and gives them a platform to share their perspectives, their experiences, and their concerns. And their voice matters, and we will hear from them today from the MSMEs. This is why I'm especially pleased that we have turned our focus today to MSMEs and the impact of COVID-19. As we chart a path for recovery and resilience, we must remember our true north. I think the reason many of us entered the international trade field is that we wanted better for our communities. We wanted to fix global inequalities. We wanted enhanced economic opportunities for those in need. So as we come here today to discuss how we can enhance resilience for the future, I want us to have a clear picture of who we truly work for and what we strive for. I know I'm in good company when I say that MSMEs are the backbone of our global economy. They account for about 90% of businesses and over 60% of employment in most economies. Yet small businesses were among the hardest hit in the pandemic. The numbers tell a clear story. In our 2020 SME Competitiveness Outlook, we sought to determine the effects of the pandemic on small businesses. Firm-level surveys across regions show that 60% of micro and 57% of small businesses were very negatively affected, compared with only 43% for large firms. The UND reports that in El Salvador, small businesses saw a 60% drop in sales in August 2020. In the United States, the World Economic Forum states over a third of small businesses are closed in 2021. Today, we're starting to see a rebound, with global exports in June up 35% year on year. There's some signs of recovery across most sectors. However, this only tells us part of the story. Financial institutions around the world warn that we are headed towards a K-shaped recovery. While many developed countries can entertain the idea of post-pandemic recovery, many developing countries are entering their third and fourth waves. Unfortunately, we found that size matters for resilience in the face of lingering challenges. It is predicted that technology-driven and large firms will see the greatest gains for recovery, while many small businesses will be slower to recover and jump back into the trade space. Make no mistake, an unequal recovery can and will exacerbate existing inequalities. We cannot afford to leave small businesses behind. How do we empower smaller firms, the very foundation of our global economy, to become more resilient in our global recovery? The vulnerabilities faced by MSMEs are multidimensional, and so we should approach our resilience building in the same manner. The future is being shaped by several competing trends and forces. We must grapple with the immediate threats of the prolonged COVID-19 pandemic, but we must also tackle the climate crisis. We also have to help businesses adapt to the changing trade space that is increasingly driven by digital technology, artificial intelligence, and e-commerce. I'd like to share how I believe we can address the factors to build long-lasting resilience for MSMEs. First, I'd like to go back to the importance of MSMEs having a voice in the international trade space. If we want to truly address the weaknesses of our trading systems, we must hear from those who are affected and take them seriously. Only when we truly listen can we respond. Our very own WTO informal working group on MSMEs, chaired by the very energetic and dynamic Ambassador Cancela, drew attention to this fact. MSMEs need a stronger voice in the WTO, but we need to go a step further. They need regulatory frameworks that provide support, access to market information, and make trade facilitation a priority. They also need increased access to finance and cross-border payments to ensure that their businesses can compete in a changing international market. We have pulled together recommendations to put in place the building blocks for firm resilience and a genuinely inclusive recovery. Secondly, I would like to draw attention to the existential threat of the climate crisis. Time is quickly running out to avoid irreversible damage due to climate change. With each passing year, the cost of adaptation continues to rise, and effects on our people and planet become more devastating. Increasingly, we not only have to prepare for harsh economic shocks, but for environmental ones as well. Taking an example from my home region of the Caribbean, small businesses saw sources of revenue wiped out due to the pandemic, but also valuable infrastructure damaged due to hurricanes. Attempts at business continuity become that much more difficult and costly for small businesses. Many simply do not have the financial means or know-how to adapt business operations quickly to become more climate resilient. Sustainability is more than just this year's latest buzzword. We must help small businesses to implement greener business practices through innovative financing mechanisms, affordable green technology, and training. Resilience to the climate crisis has a direct relationship to the bottom line of MSMEs. When businesses have these resources at their disposal, the positive effects are undeniable. I'm pleased to see Mechi Ama on this panel today, who is a testament to this fact. Her story of tenacity in the face of the pandemic is inspiring. Mechi started the cosmetic company, Black and Natural Cosmetics. The pandemic presented harsh challenges to her new business, and she needed to find a way to stay afloat. So she received coaching from the Yale community to help her brand her business at lower cost and gain organic certification to capture new consumers. In less than a year, Mechi saw her sales jump by almost 30%. And I want to just read something from the pamphlet she gave me earlier today. It says, "Here is beauty. Here is emotion. Here is our heritage. Here improves our self-confidence. It tells us who we are, where we have been, and where we are going." And I'm emotional about that because if you're a black woman, you know the hair thing, right? you know the hair thing, yeah? We go from curly to straight to, yes. Anyway, the point is she deals with hair, but she not just only deals with hair, she deals with identity, and she deals with ownership, and all of that matters. So, I'm pleased to see Mechi on the panel today, who is a testament to the fact of intervention being not only about money, but about people. Her story of tenacity in the pandemic is admirable. Results like these can be replicated and scaled. As an international community, we can do much more to help small businesses to make this green transition successfully. Lastly, I'd like to speak on the fourth industrial revolution. We've heard before that digital is the future. The face of business has less to do with a brick and mortar location and more to do with web design. However, for many small firms in developing countries, the barriers to entry in the international e-commerce marketplace are too high. This is harder still with little or no access to reliable internet. Enhancing firm resilience is closely linked to digital connectivity to take advantage of the continuing boom in e-commerce. Through its eCom Connect activities, ITC is fostering MSMEs' ability to make use of digital innovations such as new payment systems and logistics to trade online. But there's room to scale up, and we need global buy-in. This is why tools such as the Global Trade Help Desk with WTO, ITC, and UNCTAD are examples of how we can enhance and access to key trade market information. Born out of this tripartite collaboration, we've also engaged with ICC national chambers, economic and trade ministries, and BSOs to help firms get access to the free digital tool. As we build anticipation towards MC12, we recognize that this is an opportunity we cannot afford to miss. So we are at this critical juncture. The WTO informal group has set an ambitious agenda. I hope that we will get to the point where it's adopted by the 164 and that we move on today. I want to leave you today with a quote from former Jamaican Prime Minister Michael Manley, and I think it fits the challenge we face today. Any realistic vision of change must be based on the notion of empowerment of people. Resilience building at its core is about empowerment. The levers of change should also be held by the MSMEs, who are the pillars of our economies and communities. They are key to our post-pandemic recovery and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pamela, for your very important considerations on supporting MSMEs resilience and for your very inspiring words. These are key points as we continue to emerge from the pandemic and take these lessons forward with us into the future. So thank you very much again, and thank you for your kind words, by the way. Well, let me now introduce today's panel. With us today, we have Mrs. Michi Ama from Cameroon. She's the founder of Black and Natural Cosmetic, as was just introduced by Pamela. That's a hair product manufacturing company. We have also Mr. Seun Awolowo. He's the director of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, which promotes non-oil export from Nigeria with a goal of diversifying the Nigerian economy. We have also Mrs. Riz Fernandez. She is virtual with us today. She's president and founder and partner of Rags to Riches, a fashion and design house empowering community artisans from the Philippines. And we have also Maria Isabel Montoya Duarte, who has a long career in the public and private sector, and she is founder of Nica Hat. That's a Nicaraguan handmade hat manufacturing company. And last but not least, we have Mrs. Rosa Whittaker. She's CEO of the Whittaker Group and former U.S. government policy leader. So welcome again to all of you. Let's start today's discussions with you, Mrs. Sama. Black and Natural was particularly impacted by the COVID crisis. And you noted you were unable to buy raw materials from China and Nigeria. So given the challenges you experienced, can you tell us in 3-5 minutes whether the pandemic has changed the way you use trade for your business? Floor is yours, ma'am.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you once more for inviting me for such a wonderful opportunity to talk about myself, my business, and my experiences. Accept greetings from Cameroon and from my team, Black and Natural. So, yes, the pandemic affected my business operations seriously. We're not only faced with the pandemic, we're equally faced with internal conflict. So the business was struggling with both the internal conflict and the pandemic. So it was really challenging for us. Our productions went down, our sales went down. And for once, I was really afraid that my business was going to shut down. So I started thinking, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? The very first thing, I diversified. So I decided to open a beauty salon where we practice social distancing measures. We gave priority to customers who booked on appointments. We encouraged the public to book on appointments. In order to avoid overcrowding at the salon, we equally provided face masks and disinfectants and all of that. So that way we were able to keep sales running. So we produce now in the lab and we send to the salon, they use, and our customers now could easily buy some and take home. Equally, we were able to, initially we used to source from Nigeria for raw materials, but with the pandemic, Nigeria was under lockdown, so it was almost impossible to get them. Do we stop producing? No. We had to look for another alternative. So we started looking for alternative raw materials locally in Cameroon. Well, at first it was a little difficult with the research, but subsequently we got on our feet in order not to compromise the quality because we are trying to keep it 100% natural. We finally decided to source for local raw materials to be able to stay in production. And equally, we used to buy bottles from China. It's way cheaper. It's really, really cheaper buying from China. So we now had to start seeing other means through which we could package. For example, we used to produce liquid shampoo. Now we started producing shampoo and conditioner bars, which not only help us to save the environment from plastics, but equally it cut our production costs. So with the lockdown and with the conflict, a lot of people in my community were now glued to their phones. A lot of youths were using TikTok, were using Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. So we had to engage online. Maybe that's how we directly meet our customers. So we had to do a lot of short stories, short videos to engage our customers in order to keep them coming back to us. And it equally prompted us to open our website, blackandnatural.com, and it was a nice platform. Now we are considering working more into technology because the world now is a global village, and so we are considering how we can get into technology, develop mobile applications such that we can reach out to a wider community remotely. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much, Michi, for sharing with us your experience on how COVID-19 impacted your business and how you had the necessary resilience to surmount this experience. Thanks a lot. Now let me turn to our next panelist, Mr. Awolowo. Mr. Awolowo, as part of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, you have been on the front lines seeing the effects of the pandemic's trade restrictions. So based on your experience, how have Nigerian traders been impacted during the pandemic, especially small and medium-sized enterprises? And how has the Nigerian Export Promotion Council helped to mitigate this pandemic's effects? The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Let me start by thanking WTO for inviting us to the public forum. And I thank all the panelists that are here with us. It's indeed a very interesting take on the subject. Well, let me say that immediately I feel Mechi, because she speaks for all the SMEs, MSMEs, in particularly the West African sub-region of where we're neighbors. So our story is the same story that I'm hearing all the time from many of our SMEs. Of course, reduction in global demand for many of our non-oil exportable products, where the SME traders are active, led to a decline, of course, consumer purchasing power caused by the lockdowns. rising overhead cost to the unutilized production capacity. It created more debts for SMEs and MSMEs. They had to lay off workers. The cost burden on these businesses to remodel their operations using digitalization was very hard, and also of course compliance to physical and COVID rules. So we had a case of closed orders that they had been working with, and suddenly now they were held up during the lockdown. They couldn't send their goods abroad. They couldn't send them even for local consumption. So many, and then when you look at the agri sector there and perishable goods, so it was a big impact to them. However, every story has a silver lining. When there was a decrease in demand for several products, there was also a corresponding increase for other products such as ginger, shea nut. Everybody started wanting to drink ginger during the COVID, so all our ginger producers were really riled up, and everybody wanted now to eat vegetables, fruits. So it was a big order for that. So then we had to now help many of our SMEs by freighting many of these goods rather than shipment, because I was too far. So we had to get the government to open that part of the cargo airport for us, even during the lockdown, because we made a case that we really needed this to go through. And again, we had signed a partnership agreement with UPS, particularly for women-owned businesses. They get a reduction as much as 40%. So you can take your goods abroad, and you have access to also UPS warehouses all over the world. So it's a big thing for us. So many people that were selling online were able to use UPS. Women-owned businesses, of course, were able to use UPS to move many of their products. So that helped quite a lot. The opening up the economy was such a big deal, and the most important thing under the Nigerian Economic Sustainability Plan was how to save jobs and create new jobs. And that was the specific order of our president, which led to our new hashtag save jobs, create jobs. So he was particularly interested in how do we help these companies bring back the jobs, because it's easy if to save the jobs that already have been created than trying to create new jobs. So save these ones and then help them to create new jobs. So that's the focus of what we are looking at. We're running a massive grant program in Nigeria now to help companies, not only the SMEs, MSMEs, also our big companies, to give them some relief in order for them to save jobs, create jobs. So, and we're really focusing on the whole export ecosystem to revamp it and get ready for business. As you know, Nigeria is an oil exporting economy, and with the way everything is going now, I keep telling people, if we don't find another use for our oil, maybe if we mix it with honey or sesame seed and start drinking it, we're not going to be able to do anything with the oil anymore, the way oil is going. So the focus is on non-oil non-oil exports, and that is where the variety of majority of SMEs, MSMEs are trading. That's where they're creating jobs. That's why they're saving jobs. So that is the focus of us right now. We realize we need to turn the Nigerian economy into a non-oil exporting economy, and that is what we're focused on right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting insights, I have to say. Thanks a lot. Let me now introduce our next panelist, Mrs. Fernandez-Ruiz, who is joining us virtually. Mrs. Fernandez-Ruiz, you noted that R2R's supply chain and demand were significantly affected by COVID. However, you managed to pivot manufacturing to other products in demand like PPE. So besides redirecting R2R's production, were there other strategies you employed that helped you to weather the pandemic? For example, increasing e-commerce or diversifying your inputs or markets? Please, the floor is yours. Sorry, think you are muted. We cannot hear you. No, we cannot hear. Just give us some minute. Mrs. Fernandez-Ruiz, could you try again, please?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Now we'll listen to you very clear.
Oh,
go ahead.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I did say a full paragraph already, but it's okay. I could say it again. First of all, good day to all of you and greetings from Manila, Philippines. It is an honor to be with all of you today, and it is good to see many of you together, even if I'm a little sad that I could not be there in person. Our company, R2R, is considered part of the MSME group, and companies like ours are usually very lean. We do many things on our own, and we don't have much access to networks and resources, so we often use our resourcefulness to keep ourselves going. And needless to say, and I speak for many MSMEs, and I heard about them today as well, when I say that COVID was so hard for so many, and especially for enterprises like ours. For the first few months of the lockdown, we needed to think and act quickly while at home in order to keep everyone safe while keeping livelihood going. Prior to the pandemic, we created beautiful bags that are woven from dead stock fabric and fused with indigenous textiles. But during the height of the lockdown, we had to find other ways to earn revenue. So we equipped our artisans with materials and machines for them to use at home, and we started making face masks and PPEs at the time when masks and PPEs were in such high demand because we had an earlier shortage. But these were all stopgaps though. While we were producing these, we were also planning and implementing 3 key strategies. First, we started innovating on our products based on trend reports that I have been reading for fun and for work. So we created work-from-home outfits like the one I'm wearing right now, bags that could carry stuff as bags do, but also look good enough to display at home. Weave from home DIY kits, among others. Our diversification, though, is very well researched using materials and publications that are available online. Second, aside from diversifying our products, we focus our retail efforts to online. We have our online store, r2r.ph, for 10 years already, but only really focused all of our efforts on it last year. And as a result, our online sales increased by 30% last 2020 and on track to increasing by 70% this year. We had to rapidly learn and adapt customer acquisition techniques, partner with logistics providers and payment gateways, and create content, like lots of stories and even TikToks, to get ourselves out there in the digital space. And third, we surveyed countries that are managing COVID faster, and then expanded our market to these areas through partnerships and collaborations. We also reached out to corporations and industries that are still thriving in this situation and proposed collaborations with them too. All these were made possible because of online platforms, social media, global networks we have built throughout the years, access to logistics providers, both local and international, and our team's capacity to learn, adapt, and even reskill really fast. But while we were able to do all these, there are still many challenges along the way. For example, logistics and shipping are still very expensive and prohibitive for buyers. Many buyers from around the world require certifications that we don't have access to and don't have the resources for. And there are still information that seem to be reserved for those who can afford them. So while we're doing well and keeping things going, we still have a long way to go. But being part of this forum makes me hopeful that I can be part of the solution, not just for me, but for other MSMEs around the world, together with many of you here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fernandez-Ruiz, for sharing your resilient experience with us today. I would now like to turn to you, Mrs. Maria Isabel Montoya Duarte. Mrs. Montoya, you have noted the importance of moving online and analyzing digital sales opportunities for successfully navigating the pandemic's business disruptions. In a few minutes, can you discuss whether turning Nick Ahead sales more towards e-commerce changes level of export or your business model? Also, what challenges and opportunities have you discovered by using online marketplaces? So, usted tiene la palabra. Bien.
The floor is yours. Welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on the time of day in your part of the world. Greetings to all of you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be able to join you to share this session with the other panel members. We are all going to learn from each other, and I'm honored to learn about the amazing stories of my fellow panel members. I'm from Nicaragua, and for those who are unfamiliar with it, this is a country that is the joining point between South and North America on the Central American Isthmus. It has had to face numerous challenges and natural phenomena such as tsunami, earthquakes, volcanoes, but also social turmoil. And this has meant that we've had to reinvent ourselves constantly. When the pandemic hit, we were just exiting a previous crisis period, and we're working out how to address the future. And I think this ability to weather crisis helped us surviving, because as far as my business, my brand is concerned, we had a business model that stemmed initially from social enterprise. We worked with craftswomen working in rural communities, working at home, and so when the pandemic struck, we didn't have to lay anybody off or move anybody. And as such, operations and costs were not unduly affected. However, we were just about to start exporting. We were so excited about this, and unfortunately, all of the work we'd done upstream of that ended up, in our view, really being for naught. It was a huge amount of time wasted. We wondered what on earth was going to happen next. The women working with us did not stop working because they were able to do so as before from home. And there came a moment when hats were no longer really a priority item. We had to work out what we could do with the same raw materials as we used for making hats. And that's when we were able to make use of the ITC training that had enabled us to identify the major strengths of our product. The fact that it came from a community that meant that it was 100% manufactured in our country. We were not dependent on imported raw materials, in other words. This was an advantage, in fact. And that was what we were trying to really flag and use as a basis for our own reinvention. We couldn't simply stop working. The work was almost therapeutic given the difficult circumstances, and we were looking at what we could do. And a group of friends set up a collective known as Nicatizana, which was looking at possible solutions, what could be done with this product. Of course, it couldn't be exported, and that is when we began to look for other possible sales outlets at the local level, but making use of the technological tools offered by e-commerce to promote these new products that we were creating, and which were designed whilst locked down. For example, people are working from home, they're cooking for their family, they're looking at possible new innovative ways of doing things, and we wanted to come up with solutions to some of those new problems of the new way of living and working. And we started to go back to the remaining open channels that we had established. Some had shut, unfortunately, and we started to offer these products and sell the idea whereby we were going to continue to sell products imbued with our values, our DNA. It was a matter of building chemistry, because chemistry means business at the local level, and that enabled us to survive. We did, however, have the problem that we wanted to export, but that was no longer possible. But thanks to e-commerce, we are active, we're surviving, we're growing. This is social local e-commerce, and it's a way of making use of the tools that we have in order to educate our customers. Say to the customer, look, this product is handmade, it's got historic cultural value, through their work, the women making this product are empowered, they're gaining economic independence. Thanks to these products, they are able to earn enough to provide healthcare and education for their children. All of this enabled us to maintain our place on the market. We continue to do business, but with a local approach. We are sure that the pandemic will pass eventually. It has to. Mankind has been able to overcome any number of obstacles, and I'm sure it'll overcome this one, but we have to remain active and convinced that the future will be better. We need to be prepared for that better future.
Muchas gracias.
Very well, thank you very much indeed, Ms. Montoya, for sharing your experience with us. It's yet another example of how e-commerce has served as a tool for survival for many small and medium-sized enterprises. Many thanks.
By no means least, let me turn now to you, Mrs. Whittaker. Based on your extensive trade experience, how can international trade support business resilience, and how can we best support this tool so that it remains available even for the next crisis? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'm very pleased to be here. Let me just say, Ambassador Cancela, I think a very important step has been taken this morning, and that is the recognition that we're really dealing with a bimodal business resilience issue. I believe that the strong will continue to innovate, and they will get stronger, even in a pandemic. They will be fine. We should not measure progress by the strength of the strongest, but by the progress of the marginalized. And that recognition has been very encouraging. So when we talk about how trade can support business resiliency, I want to talk about the marginalized businesses, because this global trading system is only going to be as strong as its most vulnerable linkage. And I've heard some good suggestions here, but I can say for me, I've had the opportunity, after serving as the Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for Africa and being one of the developers of AGOA, coming out of government, I created a company, and since 2003, we've done nothing but work for large multinational corporations, and we're also invested in African SMEs. And in those large companies that we've worked with, we have worked with them specifically in Africa, and they come to us when they want to do well and do good and incorporate micro and small enterprises into their supply chain. And so what I want to say, it just takes some intentionality. Companies that are committed to doing it. But if you want to be resilient in trade, I think one of the best ways is to get those companies, I'm talking about those that are economically vulnerable, into global value chains. And I know that that can be done. I've seen it done at the micro level. So let me just give you just a few examples so we can move on. We're looking at a situation where African companies represent 2% of global value chains. It hasn't even moved. It's been running in place. Whereas Asia Pacific, they have 15%. And so we had to challenge. I look at a company like SAB Miller. Now, many of you who know me know I've never drank beer. I'm one of the few people in the world, I've never tasted alcohol for a number of reasons. But I was so excited about SAB Miller. They wanted to create, and they did indeed, create a new beer line with 100% local content in Africa. And they did that because they learned in East Africa, people were, communities of vulnerable people, they were using the acid from the batteries to make the homemade brew to boost the alcohol content because they couldn't afford a regular beer. So what SAB Miller did is not only did they do a safe drinking campaign with the bar, but they created a new beer with barley and different things, and they were committed. And I watched and was a part of how they worked with smaller farmer groups. They had to be very intentional, and that's about showing this is our supply chain, they worked with development organizations. So many of the NGOs in this that are part of this aid industrial complex are not helping these micro enterprises because they are too divorced from them and they have too much overhead. They need to be on the ground, as Ambassador Coke Hamilton said. And so they got with them and they opened up their supply chain and they created that beer that created so many jobs, supported so many enterprises. I've seen its work. So I'm a big believer in being intentional. We worked for Starbucks was one of our clients. Not only did we help them increase their sourcing of the primary and raw materials of coffee in Africa, we looked at other ways to do it. They opened up a farmer supply training center so that they could better coordinate the supplies on the ground. We had to look at why were not more countries qualifying, because we can't expect these companies to be development agencies. Why were they not qualifying to get into the supply chain? Because nobody was organizing the supplies on the ground. You know, we had a situation where you had coffee, bad coffee mixed with good coffee beans. Nobody organized that supply. So when I hear countries talking about, we want to move up the value chain, who's going to organize the supply in the ground? You cannot get into the value chain unless somebody's going to play that role organizing. And we brought in stakeholders in one country just to do that. And Starbucks was able to go in there and source that coffee. We said, what are your qualifications? And we saw that, and we also saw, because generally we're dealing at the highest level in these companies, Howard Schultz himself, he started a program, a branding, where they branded African enterprises, their products in all of their stores. So from music to arts and crafts, which just spurred a whole. We're talking about like ripples of hopes that created waves. And I saw it, so I believe in it. And I also saw where it didn't work. We were working with a group of organic cooperatives, promising group, because I'm looking at the data. The organic market is burgeoning, multi-billion-dollar market. And if you're landlocked, you should be thinking about organic because you're going to get a 20% toss-up. And they had all kind of problems. They had the problems you were talking about. Who was going to certify them? That was a big problem. We took them to a trade show. Whole Foods knocked on the door. Whole Foods. Whole Foods said, "We love this. We'll take all they can produce." You know why they couldn't get in? They couldn't get in because they couldn't afford the certification. And I'm like, what body? Why? How come these NGOs that's getting all this development money that I don't believe is even much of it is hitting the ground in Africa, why can't they certify? Why can't they? And then we had one group, we said at least we can get them in for their dried pineapples, dry fruit. They couldn't get in because the moisture content was off. So with all of that development aid, and let me just tell you, development aid to Africa was $800 billion in 10 years. 10 years. We couldn't find a moisturizing machine. Who would pay for that? It was like about $5,000, $6,000. The government didn't have anything. This didn't have this one. You got to fill out. We are dealing with women who had to use their thumbs and fingers to sign documents, and nobody could help them get certified, but they knew their product. So these are the kind of things that I think that I've seen the evidence. Trade can make them more resilient, but we have to be intentional about getting them in the game, and we have to understand that they're not registering. Even when you talk about MSME, globally that means $100,000 a year or below. A lot of businesses are not saying, that is not most of the businesses in Africa. You may as well say $1 billion or below, because they don't see themselves in that. They're in the informal sector. So first we need to really probably tweak that definition and really include those in the formal sector. And I can tell you, I've seen it, we've been on the front line of it. You can incorporate them into global value chains with very committed partners and stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Whittaker, for your very thoughtful comments and for sharing with us these experiences that, well, speak a lot by themselves. Thanks a lot. Well, I'm afraid that we are running out of time now, but we have another extra 10-15 minutes, right? So I want to open the session up to a discussion now with our panelists. I have some more questions myself, but I would also like to remind our audience that they are welcome to pose questions either here in the room or where they may be listening to this virtually. As a reminder, please submit your questions via the chat function for those with us virtually, or for those here in person, please write your question on the paper provided and pass it to the nearest facilitator. Let me start with one question to our panelists. Given its importance in providing business with options for new markets or inputs or creating avenues for resilience when regular business is disrupted, how can trade be made more accessible to businesses of all size and resources? So maybe we start with Mechi, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I will start by giving statistics from Cameroon. Our current GDP stands at approximately $39 billion, and approximately 51% comes from the informal sector. So just like Mrs. Whittaker said, it's the informal sector, those small businesses on the ground level, that keeps the economy running. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very important that these small businesses are being incorporated. I, for one, my business has had this serious problem of organic certification. So she's telling my story, actually. So it's difficult to export new markets because certification costs are extremely high, and it's really when you look at the cost of certification, it's almost like a running cost of your business, and you're like, should I really get the certification done? By the way, in Africa, who cares about certification? So it's very important that we look for, first and foremost, small businesses who are creating impact in their communities and tell their stories. When they tell the stories, it keeps them motivated, it keeps them active, it keeps them going. For example, on coming here, my team was super excited. Now they know that, hey, out there in the world, they are being recognized. I even came along with brochures with their pictures on it, so they know that, oh, they are seeing me over the world. So it's really exciting and it's motivating. So if they can create platforms whereby small businesses can liaise with larger businesses who have already maybe gotten the experience out there into the world, that way we can easily maybe get the certification, and maybe they equally put modalities in place that help small businesses. Like if they say, okay, certification is $1,000 for small startups with income of or revenue of $200, for example, maybe they can give 1 or 2% of that amount, but they should be able to create such avenues that would enable small businesses to trade on a global level. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Mechi. Mr. Awolowo?
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to just refer to what my dear sister Rosa has been saying about this up. Yes, it is really hard out there for SMEs, MSMEs, but with various participations such as what you did when you were in USTR and development of AGOA, you know, a lot of training has also gone in helping many of these companies get certification. You know, so I must commend the FDA, yeah, for even coming and to certify many of our companies that can now export to to the United States of America. But making trade accessible for all businesses, especially SMEs, information is critical. The access, the availability of this information should be relevant, up to date, accessible in different forms, electronic, and even physically taking it down the entire value chain to let them know. Then, most importantly, we have to look at innovative financial options to help SMEs, MSMEs grow. Yeah, payment systems for us in Africa. How do you move money across even the region, the West African sub-region? It's difficult. How do you move money, especially now move money to Egypt? So we must really look at these new options of payment options. And Ambassador, that's where you must come in. I've listened to you over the years on trade, and this is really critical for us, how to get this. Then, of course, many create more opportunities for SMEs, MSMEs to be able to display their goods virtually and through the various trade fairs. The USTR were the ones that really recommended to us in Nigeria that, look, enough of trade fairs, look for buyers' fairs. You have to go to where the buyers come. Because you go to trade fair, take Mechi, and take our products, and people come to take pictures, and that's it. Yeah, because there are no buyers there. So you want to get the buyers from Saks, the buyers from Walmart. You need them in that room to connect our SMEs, and then continuous training and capacity development of exporters and aspiring exporters. It's really going to be key. And now online product trading platforms are going to be important in the future. And I think we really have to take innovation, digitalization as our partners on this task. Let me thank the International Trade Center for the work we've been doing with them. I say the ITC is the mothership, using the Star Wars analogy, that the mothership of all trade promotion agencies all over the world. We key into them. And using their trade tools, we're able to know, what goods are trading all over the world, on a daily updated basis. So you can now know that, look, you need to stop producing this and start producing this. COVID taught us, as I think it was Maria that was saying, on fashion, they started producing masks. We did that as well. All our fashion companies, mostly women-owned businesses, we turned them to, before the masks started coming in donations from all over the world, they had to sew all these masks because, nobody was going for parties anyway. We love parties in Nigeria. I'm sure, Rosa, you know that. You've been to a few of our parties. So, but there was no parties going on, lockdown. So they started doing masks, and we got government to support and buy for them. So to create that initial money, economic survival for them, which was good. By the time the cheap masks also came, we had other factories in Nigeria who could do the same kind of Chinese and Taiwan masks that were coming in. So these are all the things we really need to do for our SMEs, MSMEs, to continue to build resilience so we can survive.
Thank you very much, Mr. Awolowo. Now I give the floor to Mrs. Fernanda Ruiz. You have the floor, ma'am.
Hello, can you still hear me? I got a little traumatized if you couldn't. Hello? Yes?
Yeah,
okay.
We can listen to you.
Okay, great. So for MSMEs, and speaking as an MSME entrepreneur myself, I would say that we need many kinds of access. And I don't have enough time, we all don't have enough time to enumerate all of them right now. So I would just mention four that have impacted us the most. First is infrastructure, because even if we try to onboard more entrepreneurs to go online, that would be very hard without internet access in the first place. So for our artisans, for example, we were able to really teach them how to use different messaging platforms so that we could talk to each other. But if the signal in their area is very weak, it's still very hard to communicate. Second is access to materials and tools that will help MSMEs reach customers outside of their locations. So these materials and tools include subsidized or sponsored certifications. I've heard certifications so many times this afternoon, and we felt that so much a few months ago when we were required certifications that were very expensive, or sponsored and subsidized trend reports. These materials and tools can help more MSMEs adapt sustainability practices as well that can contribute to the economy but also positively contribute to our SDGs. Third is access to networks that can foster collaborations and business partnerships for MSMEs. We have a lot of these networks for bigger or more high-profile companies, but MSMEs do not have significant representation in many of these networks. And fourth is access to platforms like the one that we have access to right now. If we can have a bigger group of MSMEs in this forum, I would be very happy to volunteer in some capacity to make that happen. But essentially, as what Ms. Whitaker mentioned earlier, all the initiatives need to be intentional because long-term success, they don't happen by accident.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Montoya, you have the floor. Adelante, por favor.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. I agree with all the points that the others have raised. I don't want to repeat what has already been said. There's something I would like to stress, however, because it appears essential. In my mind, training of various parts of the SMEs is essential to strengthen these and increase their resilience. I am here today because I benefited from cooperation between various domestic and international organizations, the ITC, and the various organizations helped me be here, including Swiss organizations that made this possible. And so I would like to take this opportunity to thank them all. This is essential and something we should dedicate funds to is training, because a lot of SMEs work in the informal sector and they don't all have the resources to carry out trainings, but they produce products, employment, and we've seen the figures. Over 90% of businesses worldwide are SMEs. So the reason we're talking about them is that they're important. We need to turn towards them, and I am part of an SME. So we need to help them grow. And something else that's very important that we should dedicate resources to is vaccination. All industries should have access to vaccination. Over 600 families are artisans, craftsmen, and they wouldn't have had access without vaccination. I'm sorry, but we are going to have to leave the room very soon, so if you could wrap up, that would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador.
Before giving the floor to Mrs. Whitaker, let me read some questions we received from the audience, because perhaps, Mrs. Whitaker, you can also address some of them. There was a comment by Mrs. Bolujoko about a positive outcome from COVID regarding the virtual capacity building for certification in Nigeria. This goes in line with what Mrs. Whittaker was saying on the importance of building capacity for these small businesses. Then we have Joy, African Women in Trade CEO. She's asking, how are we including African diaspora in trade, especially in value chains and supply chains? And finally, I have a question for Mr. Awolowo that says, as Nigeria recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic in finding innovative ways to become resilient and build back better economy, what essential role will effective commercial diplomacy play as a force for sustainable growth and Nigeria's economic prosperity? So with that, I pass the floor to you.
The interpreters apologize, but they have to leave as they have another assignment.
Thank you so much. Let me just say that one thing I think that is just key to all of this, and that is the fact when we look at in Africa, we're dealing with a $331 billion gap in financing for MSMEs. And so we got to look at how do we close that gap, because a lot of the things that we've talking about, even capacity, can be purchased if they had resources. Even extended internet can be done. And so this is how we make it more accessible. Certification could be paid for. The one thing that I believe that is often overlooked, we really need to establish the credit worthiness of the those in the informal sector. These credit schemes and credit ratings, these are Western tools that are not even applicable to them. And yet we know that they have the best repayment records in the world, but it's not codified, it's not anywhere. We know how they buy, how they sell, how they borrow, how they send money to each other. But if they had a digital identity using data, I just, like, in 2020, $400 billion in mobile money transactions in Africa. That is enough for a good fintech company and some other stakeholders with intentionality to give them a credit rating. Because if they had a credit rating that with the phone as a lever, that could be used to really bring them. That's the bridge from the informal to the informal sector. It would give them access to a lot. I think even with a digital data identity, it would go a long way to help us with the land tenure. Because how do most people exit poverty and get into more well-being? It's by having a house to leverage. So I think that we have to also just look at these tools. We have to close this gap, and we can do that with really giving genuine micro-enterprises a data identity, tweaking these credit scores so they can see themselves in it and it can work with them. These Western transplants will never work, so perhaps that's something that people can take up. I think is the next fintech opportunity for Africa.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Whittaker. Mr. Awolowo, can you give us some comments just in some seconds?
Yes, I know time is on. I totally agree with what Rosa said, and I think really that's the way forward. On the question on commercial diplomacy, yes, this is extremely important on how we go about connecting and building trade. With the help and support of ITC and EU, we just set up a network of trade promotion agencies in West Africa. I recently was elected president of that body. It's the ECOWAS TPO network, and so we're going to be connecting to help trade. And all this, there was a meeting in Nigeria one time with President Kenyatta and former President Jonathan, and at the end of the meeting, they read a communique, and the communique said, trade between Kenya and Nigeria must double in the next 10 years. So everybody applauded, but President Kenyatta said, wait a minute, what is the level of trade now? 0. What is double of 0? 0. So he said, no, what should happen is the Kenya Export Promotion Agency, Nigerian Export Promotion Agency, you get together and see what we can trade. And then you can give us the targets that we need to meet. So that is commercial diplomacy. And that is what we're working on now. We need to build an army of exporters because the next war now are trade wars. And it's not, nobody is coming to bomb Cameroon from Nigeria. Nobody is going to bomb Benin from this. Nobody has time for that. What we need is trade. And that is the way forward. And so we need to build this army of SMEs, MSMEs exporters, so we can improve inter-African trade, which is the lowest in the world. And that is what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me thank all of our panelists of today, the ones that are virtually present, the ones that are here with us. Thanks to you all for attending this panel. And let me also thank our interpreters because, as usual, they have been very cooperative with this session, allowing us to continue until the end of it. So, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.